Already got the poll up. That's right. That's how we do it. Because I'm late, so I'm trying to catch up. But tonight we're going to talk about adding nitrous to a supercharged motor. And the question is, should you do that? And if you do that, are there problems with that? Are there benefits? Are there pluses? Are there minuses? And so we'll talk about what those things are. And interestingly enough, like as a little spoiler alert, when you add nitrous to a supercharged motor, it kind of does the same thing. So we'll talk about that. The thumbnail that I have up is an 03-04 Cobra motor. That was a crate motor supplied to me by the guys from Ford Racing way back. And I did a lot of testing on it. We did cams and ported heads and obviously blowers. We ran turbos on it. We ran different kinds of blowers on it. We ran the Eaton. We ran a Kenny Bell twin screw. We ran a Vortec. We ran a Paxton. We ran a bunch of stuff on it. So we ran different kinds of nitrous. I ran the NOS nozzles on it where you're injecting the nitrous in the fuel. It's kind of like an individual port deal, but what it does is it took the place of the injectors. And so it's like a little disc that the injector went in, and then this went in with another O-ring, and it was kind of a, little intermediate spacer, if you will, that also injected nitrous and fuel. So very effective in terms of spacers. That isn't what we used on this test, but on this one, we used a very simple Zex kit. And what we did was it's a wet fogger setup, so it injects nitrous and fuel together into the fogger nozzle. And the fogger nozzle, in this case, we drilled and tapped the AccuFab elbow going into the Eaton, I think it's a 112 on the 03-04 Cobra stuff. So just your factory, positive displacement supercharger. Now we did have it turned up. We actually ran this at different boost levels because, quite honestly, it doesn't matter. And that's what I want to tell you is whenever I have conversations or whenever I do a video or do a live feed and whenever I'm having talks with people who are car guys, this is kind of like multiple power adders. So, this is like a compound setup. Yeah, yes and no. It is kind of like that. We have multiple power adders. It's good. If you have a blower and a turbo, which we've done on this kind of 03-04 Cobra motor, we've run twin turbos blowing into that blower. I also did it on the 3800 V6. So that can be done. You can have a compound turbo, one turbo blowing into another turbo, essentially, to simplify it, I guess. But you can also run nitrous with all of those combinations as well. And I've run nitrous with a centrifugal blower. In fact, I think I did it on this motor. We got rid of the Roots blower and put a Paxton on it. And then we were testing intercoolers and things. And so we were running a centrifugal supercharger on there. And we wanted to try the nitrous as an intercooling agent. And spoiler alert, doesn't work that great as an intercooler agent. It's very, very cold. It's negative 129 or so. There's just not very much of it because we were trying to do something that was, we were taking it from 800 to 900 horsepower, let's say. And because it had so much more of the 800 horsepower hot air, the fact that we added 100 horsepower worth of the colder element, from the nitrous stuff, just didn't make a big change in charge temperature, but did make a dramatic change in power, which is kind of why we add nitrous to begin with. But when we're talking to people about, okay, we're going to add nitrous and we're going to add it to a blower motor or a turbo motor or an NA motor, immediately people think that, you got to have a specific cam or a specific combination. Like, you have no idea how many times I get the question, hey, how will this motor respond to nitrous? Well, it'll respond like every other one. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a stock small block Chevy or a big block Chevy or a wild one or a mild one or whatever. Really, if you add 100 horsepower worth of nitrous, it's going to add 100 horsepower. And the one, there are some minor exceptions to that, but the one exception is on a turbo application. If you add the nitrous and you get a lot more exhaust energy and the wastegate isn't absolutely controlling things, you can get more boost. So you can get more than that as a gain in power, but a big chunk of that came from the extra amount, irrespective of the nitrous, came from changing the boost. Now we see this on the 03 Cobra motor. We added it to a supercharged combination, but let's see, and we could run the supercharged combination at, I think when we ran this motor, I think it was rated at 370. It made quite a bit more than that. and with the blower on, so you could run it from, like, let's say from 450 horsepower, 550, 650 horsepower, whatever, depending on where you set the boost level and things like that. And so you could use that as the starting point for how much power you want to make. I mean, we eventually made over 1,000 horsepower with this combination with turbos on it. But wherever you set that at, like if we started out with just in kind of bone stock trim and ran it with the stock blower, the stock pulleys, and the stock exhaust manifolds and all that stuff, and ran it like that, and then added 100 shot to it, it would add 100 shot to whatever we're starting with. And quite honestly, it doesn't matter that it's a supercharged combination. If we say that it's a 450 horsepower motor, if it was a 450 horsepower naturally aspirated combination and we added 100 shot to it, it would just add 100 shot. And that's what would happen. And this is exactly what happened when we did it. And if we added it at 550, it would go up to 650. If we added it at 650, it would go up to 750. And so that, because we're adding that amount of nitrous, and that's the important thing, is the amount of power that you get really is a more than anything else, more than everything else. The amount of nitrous that you're adding to it is going to determine what kind of power gain you could get. So if you're adding this amount of nitrous, and when I say this amount of nitrous, it's not really predicated on, you know, oh, we have 100 jet in it, or we have a 125 jet, or call it whatever you want, because we can vary that a lot. I remember hearing people brag about, oh yeah, we made this nitrous kit, we made, you know, 150 horsepower from a 100 shot. Well, you didn't. You added 150 horsepower worth of nitrous. You did that because you didn't run it at 900 psi. You ran it at 11 or 1200 psi. You know, and so that's just increasing the amount of nitrous flow that you're going into it. The orifice size, the flow rate of that orifice size is dependent on the nitrous pressure that you're doing to it. Now, obviously, you can ruin that 100 shot. You can, like we just talked about, you can dramatically increase that 100 shot with nitrous pressure, which, guys, why you see the guys heating the bottles with torches, which is not a good idea. But you can also hurt it by, one, not having enough temperature in the bottle and enough pressure in the bottle. Like if you run it at 800 psi, it's not going to do very well. Also, if you don't have enough nitrous in there, so you'll drop in pressure and you'll have a drop in available nitrous flow. So as the bottle's getting empty, you're just not going to be able to add power to it. Doesn't matter what the jetting size is. So you certainly can hurt that. You can also, and this is more for the higher shot stuff, when guys are trying to max the thing out and they're, you know, I'm putting a 300 shot on it. Yeah, but your solenoids only flow 250. So that becomes how much nitrous you can add. Doesn't matter what happens after that, because you can't do any more than will flow through whatever the minimum orifice is. So, you know, a lot of that stuff is important, but a lot of guys have misconceptions about what happens when we add this. Oh, it acts as an intercooler, and it, yeah, and you can say all of that. Yeah, if you add nitrous to a supercharged motor, you know, if we add 100 shot to a 450 horsepower motor, it's going to lower the charge temperature probably a little bit. Is it enough to change the power? I don't think you get the power gain just from that. I think you get it from the nitrous. And also, this thing had an air-to-water intercooler on it already. So the amount that you would lower it going into the intercooler is not the same change as you would get coming out of the intercooler. So how much of a gain do you really get? And if you change the temperature by 10 degrees, did you really get, I know we have a temperature change, but did you get really more oxygen molecules? You know, there's a lot of things to discuss about that. And, you know, guys can argue about the nitpicky things as much as they want. But when we do that, when we have it set up, when we have the bottle filled up so that we have the temperature right on the bottle and the pressure right on the bottle, and then we have our tune correct, and that's the other way you obviously could ruin or improve upon, let's say the jetting is, you know, on the first 100 shot of stuff, a lot of times if we have good fuel in it, we don't take timing away, run full timing in it. And so you might be able to pick up a little bit more by running all of the timing in it. Sometimes with 100 shot and you pull 2 degrees away or 4 degrees away, sometimes it doesn't make too big of a difference. It definitely makes a difference on the power output of the NA motor if you pull 4 degrees away, but it doesn't seem to make as much of a difference when we're pulling timing away with the nitrous, particularly when we get to the higher levels of stuff. So all of those things you can play with and you can adjust. You know, did it help a little bit? Yeah. Did it help a lot? Maybe not. The amount of nitrous that you add is the big thing, and then the tune, obviously. All of those things are important. But if you add that to a supercharged motor, you should expect, and you've done it properly, you add 100 shot, you should expect 100 horsepower. If you have more flow, you should expect more. But that's kind of what it does. And it's I keep talking about this because I want to get people to understand that. I don't want them to expect miracles that, hey, look, I added on a blower motor, it added way more or it added way less. You know, on turbo motors, we have that discussion. And I've run nitrous a lot on turbo motors, trying to use it as the intercooler in place of an intercooler, trying to use it in addition to the intercooler. And on a turbo thing, that's another discussion that we could have it for another night. But it obviously, if it changes the boost, you can change the power output a lot, because if you have a combination making 30 or 35 horsepower per pound of boost, which is not unusual at all, and you change the boost by 2 pounds, that's, hey, I picked up 170 horsepower. Well, you picked up 2 pounds of boost, and then you picked up also the 100 from the 100 shot, which all of that's good, and that's more power. But you could have also just turned the boost up a little bit, but that's all good. So we'll see what you guys got going on. This is on this motor. Like I said, we did run. I did the boost bash for Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forwards way back, and I'm going to try to have Evan and Jim on as an interview, because those guys are fun guys. But we did. I ran all four. I ran this thing NA, which people hadn't done that I know of before I did this. I ran the 03 Cobra motor, naturally aspirated. I don't know why anybody would do that, but I said, look, I need a starting point. I need to know what's it doing. We can run the blower stuff and run that as a stock motor, and that's fine. But what does it do NA? And then what does it do when we, add stuff to it? And when we did cams to it, the cams picked up 50 horsepower NA, and they picked up a bunch of horsepower under boost. And so all of that worked out good. The thing had a lot of potential. But when we did the boost bash, we ran this Eaton supercharger. We ran it at, the test was at 2 different boost levels. We ran the Kenny Bell at the same 2 different boost levels, same air fuel, same timing. We ran the Vortec, I think it was a Vortec, at the same 2 boost levels. And then on the Vortec, we ran it blowing through the manifold that they supply, which is just a plenum that bolts onto the factory air to water intercooler that uses the 03 Cobra like lower manifolds. They just made a lid that goes over the top of that, and that lost a bunch of power compared to having the long runner manifold. And then we also ran it with the long runner manifold. So we ran it intercooled and non-intercooled, long runner, short runner, a bunch of stuff. And then we also ran it with 2 of the turbos from Jimmy at HP Performance, Jimmy and Nathan over there. And the 2 turbos obviously were good, and they were a little on the small side, honestly. I think that they were 57 millimeters, 2 of them. But that got us to about 1,000 horsepower, 995 or 6 or something like that. And so that was good testing for that. And that was a couple of things that we did for Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forwards, like I said. But we also did cams and nitrous and just, an endless amount of things. See what you guys got going on. We've got our polls already up. And the poll is, should you add nitrous to a supercharged motor? Got 2/3 saying yes and 1/3 saying no, that you shouldn't do that. 4.6 things. It's official. Richard going to UTI. Very excited to get master knowledge and bring my builds to life. There you go. Hey, anything that you do to educate yourself and learn more, everybody should be all for. Dan, nitrous fixes everything. Did it fix any of the cup motors? I'm here for mod motor stuff, although a turbo 2-valve, 1,000 horsepower. That's good. That's good for a 2-valve. You use Total Seal race rings. Must call the company and find out what special rings you can use. What are you using them for? I wouldn't use them on a blower and a turbo. With turbos that are too big, nitrous fixes turbo lag. It definitely fixes that. I'd rather add nitrous to a turbo engine, but hey, a blower would be fun too. You think adding 100 shot on a 1.7 Kenny Bell PI head swap with gap rings will work? Yes. You just have to have the right octane for that. And I'm hoping that it's intercooled. Stock bottom in. I would definitely have ring gap on something like that. I would have something more than stock ring gap. Nitrous works well to help turbo spool at higher elevations where atmospheric pressure is not as dense. It helps them spool also at lower elevations as well. Turbos are too small. Add nitrous. Boost and juice. Yeah, that is good. I never ran the nitrous on this 03 Cobra motor with the turbos that we did. Figured out that my line bursting doesn't seem to have taken out my transmission. Got to see if I have 3 gears tomorrow. If I do, then cam swap over Easter. There you go. Yeah, let me know if you did. You just have one of the transmission lines let go? We don't talk about cleaning up the air in cup cars. There you go. Can't wait to learn about all the turbo goodness. Get to play with NOS and superchargers as well. That'll be good. You just got to learn what the engines do and what they want and how much they'll take, and then push it a little bit. Nitrous supercharger. I like this guy. I like how he parties. I don't think I ever ran we ran the nozzles, but I think we only ran 150 or a 200 shot on the nozzles. And I only ran those on the NA motor because we had to run the NA manifold to make those nozzles work. But it added a lot of power, as you would expect nitrous to do. It's kind of cool. They had the plastic lines and all that. And I remember asking them, hey, will these interfere with the spray pattern of the injectors and stuff when you're not using the nitrous? Trying to learn EFI tuning on my own. What books or resources you recommend? There's lots of stuff online. Go to HP Academy. They've got stuff. Lunchbox, what's going on? Who would have thought compressed air would cost more than nitrous over a 10-year span? My citation based on Ryan Mitchell's dealings with it after many years of being the fastest small tire car, including nitrous bottle refills. I don't know what you're saying there. Richard was wanting to throw some dual twin turbos on my 351, but I don't want shorties or injectors. Wait, wanting to stay old school. So you're wanting to blow through a carburetor then, I guess? I'm really ready to get down and dirty with valve events, timing, and fuel trims. Okay. You don't learn that stuff right away. You learn other stuff. You have to know what you have to understand what motors want, and then the tuning and stuff will teach you what buttons you need to push to give it that. Previous owners seem to do cut the tubing for the transcooler, then splice it with a 5/16 fuel line. I should really blow a few bucks and do an AN fitting or something. Yeah, did he have it just hose clamped? Because what's the pressure in that for the transcooler? How much does anybody know how much pressure is in a transmission going to the cooler? You're looking to tune aftermarket or OEM. I've done a few mega squirts, and the manual for those was really good in the day, explaining what the sensors and parameters were on the table. I got a 750 Holly and a Victor Jr. Okay, are you going to try to blow through a standard 750 Holly? I don't see how compressor supercharging costs more than nitrous. You can buy a scuba compressor, and each tank fill costs less than $3. I can see how at least the kit that they showed, or the components, when they tested at West Tech, that stuff would be expensive. But the fills, yeah, would not be. I mean, just filling air, that shouldn't be a problem. Do you know anything about Todd Warren cams? I don't. I think somebody has mentioned that in previous live feeds, but I've never tried anything. If anyone in the chat has never had nitrous on anything, you're missing out. Even a small shot is always a good time. I agree. Like I said, we've had these chats before, and every car guy or gal, I think most everybody here is a guy, but of the 1% or the 0.5% or whatever that watches, you should try nitrous on something. It's so easy to hook up, and even if you just ever run one bottle of stuff, it's just fun. And on any car, on a whatever. If you make some modular cams, okay. A new raised air, compressed air infrastructure costs more than nitrous in order to make multiple rounds. I don't know why you're being vague. I don't know why you're... No, I don't understand that. I have a kit here. I never actually used it. That said, I feel like L6 may be the wrong engine to do that. Like the intake has weird distribution. It has that with the carburetor already, right? What is the most boost you can run correctly in a carbon closure setup? I don't know. I don't have any idea. I don't ever try to do the most on stuff like that. I would need to do some fairly extensive testing to figure out if the carbon closure has problems with the carburetor itself. But initially, right off the bat, I would be concerned with distribution problems on a carbureted manifold, whether it's a single plane or a dual plane anyway. So you may get to the point where you have distribution problems with the intake manifold and you hurt the motor because of that way before you have to worry about what's going on with how much the carbon closure will take or how much the carburetor will take. I thought transcooler circuit was less than 50 psi, and a real EFI fuel line will take way more than that. You need a $10,000 compressor to fill up the air tanks. It's not just regular scuba tanks. The feed lines and valves are expensive. Yeah, the valving that they had and the programming and all the stuff that they have to allow the thing to work was fairly elaborate and not, I mean, it took them a long time to make that and a lot of testing to make it. So you're right. It's more involved than that, but I didn't know that the filling was a problem. Why did Chevy never mass produce a small block with cannon valve heads? They looked at that, obviously, on the DZ302 stuff, and probably other stuff too. I mean, the engineers get to do stuff that we don't get to see a lot of times. And they probably did try it because they had it on their big blocks and Ford was doing it. But I think that they missed the boat there. Because the DZ302 with like Boss 302 heads would be good. What was your experience like spraying 462 valves? I did a bunch. We sprayed every 2 valve that I ever had. Stock ones, PI ones, non-PI ones, all of them. How much time is a scuba tank good for? I mean, for a person, you're only going to get 45 minutes. Obviously, it would depend on your bottom time and the depth, but I don't know. These guys are not using scuba tanks. I think the tanks that they're using, at least the ones that they had when we were testing at West Tech, were much bigger than that. Transcooler lines are low pressure. The rubber just needs to handle the trans fluid and the heat. You need a bare compressor, $10,000 at least. A small scuba compressors take hours to fill a tank. Don't they want to fill the tank slowly anyway on a scuba tank? And then they need to cool it while they're doing it? What's the most boost you have correctly run on a carburetor enclosure correctly with the correct fuel mixture? I never measured the fuel mixture on any of those ones that we did with carb enclosures that I can remember. So I don't have an answer to that. I can look at some of the let's see here. I'm thinking 13 or 14 pounds or something like that. And I remember running that. This would be, I think that these are big block Chevys. Supercharged. Diffuser hat. That one was 1150. That was like 11 pounds. Yeah, that one's 1200. Yeah, 11 and a half was like 12 pounds on that one. I don't remember going. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember going more than that. And if you have a bank, you can fill tanks in less than a minute if you don't mind the gas being super hot. Like scuba tanks can be dangerous. Honestly, there are older aluminum ones that are known for exploding. No, we don't want to fill tanks quickly. Yeah. Motivated me on this live feed to spray my 4.6. Okay. Yeah, just start out with 75 or 100 shot or something. It'll be fine. Okay, any guess as to horsepower torque loss using a stock truck LQ4 throttle body on a Trailblazer SS with adapter? I don't know. We're going to test that. And it might be, what is the rest of the power output for the motor? If an otherwise stock motor, I don't think you're going to change the power at all. We fill with a Bear compressor and fill 7 tanks in 8 minutes. That's pretty fast. Should I use a red hot cam with a single turbo setup or just buy the stage 3 turbo cam? And should I get my 243 heads ported or buy the new Brawler 243 CNC ported heads that are a couple of bucks more? Chad, what is your desired power output and what are you using this for? And what size is the motor? Thompson, the valves that they use are a lot bigger than a scuba tank valve. The E46 turbo build is, let's see, almost finished. I need to wire up the scavenge pump and mass airflow sensor and prime the turbo. There you go. It's Bauer, by the way. It's not Bear. The West Coast Bauer distribution center is 2 miles from my house. What was the consensus on spraying the 03 Cobra? It worked great at every power level that we tried it at. GM1 was the first time the system was run in 1940 to improve high altitude performance. They tried a lot of stuff on the piston engine development during the war. I made the mistake of buying EFI Live off the cuff before knowing what I had to know, so I'm hoping to get some use out of it for now. I'll check out HP tuners. Low buck or LQ4 with low buck truck cam, Trailblazer SS, the most likely long tubes. I don't think that there's going to be a big change there. We're going to test it the next time I'm down running a motor, and we'll find out. But I don't think that there'll be a big change with that. Have you ever seen the video of the inline 6 Nissan Turbo on the dyno? It sucks all the air out of the room. It was nuts. That would be just a few seconds to empty a scuba tank. It's a 5.3 daily single cab, 2008, forged piston rod, stock crank, looking to make 500 horsepower NA. Okay, Chad. Yeah, you're not going to do that with either a stage 2 turbo cam or a red hot cam. You're not going to make 500. You definitely will need ported heads to get to 500, and you're definitely going to need some kind of other intake manifold to get to 500 with the 5.3. If you're going to be adding boost to it, I wouldn't worry about any of those things. And if it's a daily driver, 500 isn't the number that I would be looking at for a 5.3. It's not going to be very drivable. Not only am I a scuba instructor, I'm a certified gas blender with my own fill station and a few gas boosters. Clean NA to break the motor in, then probably throw a single turbo on it. Okay, so I wouldn't worry about, you should be looking more like at 450. Just put a 5.3 with a low buck truck camshaft in it. And if you want to put an aftermarket head on it, if you plan on turning the boost way up because you want a thicker deck, that's a good idea. Otherwise, if you're, I don't know how much power you're trying to make once the turbo is in. If it's a less than 1,000 horsepower, wouldn't worry about any of that. Put a low buck truck camshaft in it, put springs in it, put bigger injectors in it, leave whatever heads are on it, and put one of our G42 turbos on it, and then you're good to like 1,200. What's the single most interesting fact that you know? I know where the ampullae of Lorenzini is on a tiger shark, and I know why it's different than other sharks. I'm a gas blender as well. Richard's son really gets into his games. Oh, you can hear him in the background. Yeah, he's playing something. All of these symptoms have their quirks and limits. It may well work great for you. What if you run nitrox on a car? Getting into crazy stuff here. It's better to run fuel pumps in series or parallel. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? I have run pumps in series. That way you can have a small pump feeding a bigger pump. So we put an inline pump in there to step things up. And then by doing that, you improve the flow rate of the first pump. But that doesn't flow as much as two of the bigger pumps, run in parallel if you're trying to do that. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. And mine even had a bypass to go around with check valves to go around the big Bosch external pump that I had on the Mustang. Stainless exhaust valve, B-head, Texid block, 8.5 to 1, 76 millimeter. Okay. 100-pound injectors, 50 millimeter wastegate, dual 40 mil. Why do you have dual blow-off valves? I'd rather have dual wastegates and a single blow-off valve. But all of that will work. In your experience, what is the lowest oil pressure at idle that proved to be reliable? We've got a new gen Hemi Dodge tow vehicle that only makes 28 at idle and 50 at RPM. Like, what RPM does it have? What RPM is 50? 28 at idle is lower than I want, but I'm not interested in an absolute number. I'm more interested in what did that thing do when it was new. Has it always been like that? Because if it's always been like that and it's run 100,000 miles, I don't worry about it. What I worry about is every time I start this thing up, the oil pressure is at 40, and then while I'm cruising on the freeway, it goes up to 60. And then when it doesn't do that anymore, whatever those numbers are, that's what I worry about. I worry about some sort of change. What happened? What changed the situation? Then you got to figure that out. Is the pump wearing out? Is it the sending unit? Is it whatever it is? You got to find that out. Has anyone used a reverse engine flow camshaft like that they used to do the Buick nailhead because exhaust ports were too small? And how much would it cost to do that? So are you talking about doing a hot V motor and running the exhaust out of the intake and the intake out of the exhaust? That's almost never a good idea because they the exhaust is always smaller than the intake. One problem with nitrous is keeping the pressure consistent. If you have big tanks of nitrox and regulate the pressure to say 1,000 psi, the results would be way more consistent. Yeah, well, that's not a good idea. Because if you look at just look at the flow rates of exhaust, I know they're tested differently, but if you did both of them as inlet flow or both of them as exhaust flow, you'd see that the bigger, better intake port is always better than the exhaust. Certainly in any conventional motor that you're looking at, any small block Chevy, big block Chevy, small block, big block Dodge, Ford, whatever, and LS, any of those, the exhaust always has pressure helping it flow, so it's never flows as much as the intake does. O3 Cobras love 50 shot to cool things down, small intercooler. In our testing, the nitrous doesn't cool things down. It doesn't change the charge temperature very dramatically. It does add a lot of power, though. It adds whatever power worth of nitrous that you add, but the charge temperature doesn't change very dramatically because you're not adding very much of it relative to how much hot air you have. Richard, what would you do to a stock 350 to get the most NA power using as many stock parts as possible? Do you think the single plane or dual plane works best on a stock motor? Well, one, if you said stock parts, you're not going to find a stock single plane manifold. You'll only find stock dual plane manifolds if you're looking at the older carbureted stuff. If you're saying that you're keeping a stock camshaft, then you're going to want a dual plane because it's not going to make, with any sort of stock camshaft, it's not going to make power very high. I mean, I guess you could go back to the biggest cam that you could find from a production standpoint, and I separate that from over-the-counter stuff that people keep saying in comments that, oh, no, they had this cam. No, they didn't have that cam. That cam never came out of production motor. You could buy that from the dealership and then put that in or have them put it in, but that's not a production item. So if you go back and look at the Duntov cams, 3030 cams, whatever, look at those cams, those had a lot of duration in them. And or if it's a big block, you could look at a L88 cam or a ZL1 cam or one of those. But even all of those had dual plane manifolds on them. And anything that would be lower performance than that, it's all going to be dual plane stuff, because none of them have, like, especially a small block Chevy, that you just don't have very good head flow out of anything. I didn't buy it new is why I ask. It will never make more than 52 at any RPM. That seems weird. I would check if it's not continuing to go up with the gear rotor pump like that. I would look at the spring on it. The hot D was done to shove as much nitromethane in the engine as possible. I think what we're talking about are different things. Tommy Ivo was famous for doing it with nail heads, showing nitromethane and probably misspeaking it rather than getting the nitromethane exhaust out. So he was limiting the inlet power to making sure that he got enough exhaust out. Germans love their hot D engines. Both Mercedes and BMW have them. I think we're talking about different things. I'm talking about reversing the engine and have it draw air in through the exhaust port and have it exit through the intake port. I'm not talking about just having the exit of the head, a conventional exhaust port, exit through the middle of the motor. That's not what I'm talking about. Could an engine survive with camshaft bearings converted to full roller in a camshaft on the street? I don't know why you would do that. It'd be way more problematic than you need to try to do. If you wanted maximum power of the big block, what power adder would you choose? Definitely turbos. Stock heads on small block Chevy 350. What's the best way to increase head flow? You have to do all of that to any factory head. The best head is probably, arguably, I mean, guys can argue the LT4, LT1. That's not really a small block head, in my opinion, because it takes a dedicated block, but it is a small block. So I don't want to upset the LT1, LT4 contingent. but the Vortec head kind of gets the nod for that. So you have to do all the stuff to that head if you want it to get it to flow more. You have to port it, the valve job. I don't know that guys usually do bigger valves than that. You could, you know, a 202.16 is kind of where guys end up. What would the cons be of camming my 05 Ram 5.7? It depends on the cam you chose and how big it was. It could be idle quality or fuel mileage, but it would definitely make more power. I remember there was talk of 2-stroke top fuel Hemi with an exhaust port at the bottom, like a Jimmy Diesel, and only intake valve and light springs let the blower open the valves. Do you have to use specialty computer software equipment to adjust timing while using nitrous oxide on modern fuel-injected Cobras? Well, we had a standalone management system, so we could take timing out with our computer. And so I think on that one, we probably ran it fast on it back then. And so we just told it, here, 4 degrees less. It's real easy. The Buick holds their forcing boost through the exhaust port and flowing through the intake port. Did they just have a really bad intake port on those? What was the deal? I don't know why they would do that. Did you deck the head? Did that increase compression? Yeah, you could. You could raise compression a number of ways. You could mill the block. I don't know where the piston is. If it's down in the hole, if it's at zero deck, if it's above that. You could change the piston design to raise compression. You could put a smaller head gasket, a thinner head gasket. You could mill the head. You could do all that. But milling the head doesn't usually change the flow rate of the head, though. Doesn't really change that. Should you add nitrous to a supercharged motor? 7228. Let those guys be. Yeah, Brendan, you have to have. You could probably do that. You might be able to do that with a factory computer. I don't know how you'd get it to switch when you're just injecting the nitrous on a factory ECU. We could get it to do that on the aftermarket stuff, but quite honestly, I don't normally go to that trouble to have to put a switching wire to it that activates when we activate the nitrous. For the nitrous run, we just take away 4 degrees. The Buick had a bad exhaust port, but they had different type of Hemi atmospheric head. Nitrous belongs in every motor. How big of a nitrous shot can I safely run on a stock internal 4-cylinder 750cc engine with a wet system and flat slide carburetors? The carburetors don't matter. 93 pump, safe jetting to start. Any tips on timing or plugs? I don't know what the motor is or what the motor wants NA. You'd have to start there so you know how much timing it wants NA. And then you take away 4 degrees per 100 horsepower. And I don't know how much power that motor makes by itself. So usually as a function of the NA power output, you would start at like 25% and then maybe go up to 50%. And a colder plug, always a good idea with nitrous. Dual blow-off valves. So I have air-to-water intercooler mounted on the intake. Short and small intercooler charge tube to intake, trying to keep it bleed off to keep flutter down and response up. Okay. I have a Honda B16. I want to add nitrous. Would a 4-port fogger system be the best way to go? Probably not. And is this a race Honda B16? The problem with running an individual port fogger setup for a motor like that is it's hard to get small enough jetting so that you only add it's easy to get 100 horsepower jetting, but since you have 4 of those, you would add 400 horsepower. that's not going to work very well on your V16. It's just going to blow it up. But if you only wanted to add 100 horsepower, then you got to get 25 jets. And then the 25 horsepower jets for those are very, very small. And the problem is the smaller the nitrous jet gets, the easier it is for it to get clogged or for it to get iced up. And so you don't need that on most V16s. I've run lots of nitrous on V16s for all the books that I did and all the racing that I did. And if you just put a single wet fogger in front of the throttle body, you're all good. If you consider doing a Big Bang 462 valve, I have, and it is one of the motors that's on the list. Buick wanted to use turbos back in the 60s. Yeah, Jim Bell did a lot of turbo stuff with the Buick guys, and they've done turbo stuff. They've been turbo fans for a long time. You also have to beef up the lower rotating assembly with nitrous if you want to live a long time. That's not accurate. You can run 100 shots on stock motors. I ran 20, 30 bottles on my 5-liter Mustang. So if you don't detonate it, you can run smaller shots, like 100 shot, and that was on a 225 horsepower rated motor. You can run that very easily. You don't have to do anything to the bottom end. Intake reversion reduced with supercharger. Low lift flow increased with nitrous. Exhaust reversion reduced. I don't have any idea what you're asking. Why would low lift flow increase with nitrous? And why would intake reversion reduce with a supercharger? 4G63, I don't have a way to run one of those on the engine dyno. I'd like to see you build a 1.5 or 1.6 or even a 2.4 Honda engine and test it. I've run endless 1.6 and 2-liter B-Series Honda engines on the engine dyno. I did build a 1.5 B-Series Honda engine that we ran at Bonneville, and because we wanted it to fit in a specific class. You mentioned books. Would you recommend a specific one for some at-home nitrous information? You just do a search for nitrous books, and you'll find stuff. D16 with gap rings will hold 100 shot. Yeah, that's not a problem as far as ring gap goes. And the Honda, the D stuff, I guess to some extent, but more specifically the B series stuff, because it has so much head flow relative to its power output, it will take more nitrous than relative to its power output. It will take more nitrous than a lot of motors will. As far as ring gap goes, do aftermarket rings come gapped? No, not all of them. Some of them come pre-gapped and some of them do not. But it's always a good idea to check, because the people that gap the rings, if they're the aftermarket piston company, they won't know what you're doing with that motor. So if they gap it for an NA motor, that's not what you need for boost. B20 supposedly will take a 150 ramped in. I don't know why you think that a B20 does that. The amount of nitrous that will take is a direct function of the NA power output. But we've run 150 shots on Honda engines before. I mean, if we can go from 250 to 750 with the turbo, we can add 150 shot with nitrous without any problem. K20 builds. I did write a book on K-Series stuff. I've done quite a few of those. What's your favorite motor overall? I don't have one. It's whatever the next one I'm doing. One thing for the person learning about tuning, timing is a key to power and not blowing stuff up. Airfill needs to be close and can be dialed in further after the timing is sorted. You did a rear mount turbo setup. Have you ever thought about doing a mount turbo system? In that video, you said the intake can be as long as it needs to be and won't lose horsepower. I don't know what you mean by mount turbo system. I don't know what that is. What spark plugs you run on a turbo application? On a lot of stuff, on the stuff that we ran at Bonneville, we ran on the turbo stuff. We ran iridiums and we ran really cold ones, like there'll be a heat range 10 probably. And all the big bang motors were like that too. They're all a 9 or a 10. One of my favorite videos. And then we run very little plug gap either. We run 19, 18, 19, 20. It just helps with the, you don't have to have a, we have an individual coil setup for the LS stuff, which works well. And we got 4 to 4.5 milliseconds of dwell. So I have a fairly hot spark, but at that kinds of cylinder pressures, you want to have, make it easy for it to jump that gap. One of my favorite videos Richards does is him running an extremely wide variety of AFRs and timing ranges. It's shocking how far off you can be and make most of the horsepower extremely revealing for tuning. Yeah, the air-fuel ratio has, you have to be way off. You have to really get into, like in the 9-to-1 range, you can, and not on boosted stuff, like on NA stuff, 9-to-1 starts getting into the problematic area. And if you get into 8-to-1, you can start getting misfire and stuff, and that's definitely going to lose power. And then we showed dropping a bunch of timing, which is why when guys run pump gas and they're down, if the motor wants to run at 21 or 22 degrees to make good power with good fuel and an intercooler and all that stuff on a turbo application, and you have to run it down at 12 degrees because you have pump gas in it, it'll still make power, just not what it does when it has all the right. A mid-mount turbo system. I don't know that that's going to be any different than a remote turbo setup. I don't know how that's going to be any different. Just the response rate would be a little different. 100 shot on a 5.3 or 6 liter, is ring gap needed? Yeah, I would put ring gap in everything. I imagine ring gap is needed for any amount of nitrous. It's not. I never put ring gap in my Mustang engine, and we ran endless bottles of nitrous through it. And I did dumb stuff like I did it on the freeway. We did it on road courses. We did it all kinds of stuff. That being said, it's better if you put some ring gap in it. And don't try to turn the nitrous on at low speed. Yeah, I blew up an air intake doing that. 2 heat ranges colder for your setup. Is a small block Chevy 5.7 Vortec turbo big bank coming? Maybe just rods and pistons upgrade to see what. No, a big bang motor will never have rods and pistons. A big bang is only the stock stuff. Honda engines are overbuilt. Yeah. The intakes are what you have to keep an eye on. I like intake. I like the Honda stuff. Their intake manifolds are particularly good. I remember trying to make stuff that was better than the factory stuff, and it's very difficult. The P30 intake manifold, very good. I remember the first time I did a comparison between that and the Type R manifold, because everybody was like, everything Type R, because you're a Honda guy, Type R is the thing, especially back then. And anything that engineers did, and rightfully so, because they're amazing. But if you put a Type R manifold from a B18 C5 on a B16, it makes less power until the very top. And I showed people that. I'm like, look, yes, Type R, yes, better. We get that. It's better. But here's the downside. Oh, no way, it's better. It's better everywhere. Mine's so much more responsive. I said, no, it's not. Here's what happens. Here's what happens when you run a P30 manifold that they designed for this particular motor. Or when you put a Type R on it, it's a short runner, long runner thing, and plenum volume comes into play and all that stuff. And so I said, look, I don't care which one's better. I'm just telling you that this is what they do. You can like it or you can not like it, but this, I guarantee you that this is what happens. I had a K20 swap hatch for about an hour one day and got offered too much to keep it. That's a cool setup, though. A K20, I remember riding in Ishes, and it was really fast. Previously talked about airflow on nitro engines. There's no misfire or power loss with super rich nitro mixes. As a matter of fact, it'll continue to make even more power. Yeah, because you're just adding nitromethane to it. First gen Camaro blew its bonnet at Yellow Belly. Definite nitrous explosion. one spot under the intake SSR needs V grooves in the quench or soften chambers, then add nitrous. Not good. Bye piston. Do you need forged pistons to run boost 10 pounds on stock LS? No. No, we ran all of the Big Bang LS motors all had junkyard motors, junkyard bottom ends with added ring gap, but stock block, stock crank, stock rods, stock pistons, and we made more than 1,500 horsepower on one of them. So for 10 psi, you could run that as long as you put ring gap in it. You could run that all day, every day. Got a couple more minutes. Near. Overbuilt, what's going on? Head studs to MLS. How much horsepower is a starter worth? Well, I know that there's gear reduction on that, but you can move the hybrid motor. Running an NGK BR7 with 19 gap. Just wondering if there's something better. Not something better. If you're trying to run a lot of boost, I would go with something colder than that. Richard, have a supercharger kit for a Ford V10 if anyone is looking for one. Oh, is it for a 3-valve or a 2-valve? What do you think of long-tail boats? Would you put an LS1, run it at Lake Ming? I like the old Chris Craft boats, and I've yet to, and it's been years and years and years, I've yet to go up to the regatta thing that they have up at Lake Tahoe, where they have all of these old boats that are, some of them have like aircraft engines in them. And I would love to see that, because the detailing on the wood and these are super rich guys that have these things. And so the amount of time and effort and money and hand fabrication and work they put into these is just like, they're just art, man. Oh, the Thailand stuff. No, I like watching that. I like watching the box of diesel stuff. I do follow that. That's amazing. Stock oil pumps. Yeah, all of the stuff that we ran on the stock bottom end stuff, stock oil pumps, pickups, windage trays, everything was stock. We reused the stock rings, all of that. Stock, the L33 that I have up, stock lifters, all that stuff. One of my racers co-workers raced a bar stool. They used a starter motor. Cool. The 2-valve. Oh, it's a Novi 2000. Okay. Hell cylinders 8 and 7 always run so lean. Has anyone shaped an intake to help distribute airflow better? No, and I need to go back and look and see if, I don't know if we saw that when I did the 802s. I know that that's been an ongoing myth for the LS guys. I like watching the K-boats. Pretty impressive. Yeah, that is cool. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. What plug do you recommend for boost? The one that is cold enough to do what you're trying to get it to do. After finish grinding the welds on my crushed tubes, so I can bolt the upgraded K-frame in. Not sure what color to paint the engine bay. I'm gonna have to take my steam cleaner and clean out the engine bay of the Sprint, because it's got a lot of funk in it. It's got like Bootsy and Commodore, like before Lionel Richie lost his funk, Commodores. Who else? Cameo, that would be another good one. The Atomic Dog, I forgot. Settle on the V1 HD SCI trim head unit for the 300 blower. Okay. Plug for 1,000 horsepower drag build. We've run NGKs or the Denso Iridiums. I hate drilling out the broken exhaust bolts on LSs. Yeah, Jimmy's going through that right now because when I say we, him is mocking up a manifold on the side, and when he took the manifold off, there was but a few holding that thing on, and all the other ones were broke. So they're gonna have to do that. It's nice when you get a little bit sticking out, and then you could weld something on there and just spin it out. That's a lot easier. But having to drill it. The last time I ran an LS at West Tech, Troy did that. We had 2 of them that were bad because we were going to run the turbo on it. Nice 750 horse head unit, turned a bit slower to save wear. An 8 heat range. Yeah, you could do that. We run a 9 or 10. The colder is not going to hurt anything. I know a lot of guys get scared about that. Oh, it's going to misfire. I drove around in my Civic every day in my turbo Civic and was not using a turbo very much because it was a Bonneville car, and drove around every day on 10s, on IQ 31s. And so I never had the thing. It didn't misfire. It didn't load up. It didn't do anything. It just sparky, just like it's supposed to. Then I did the welding, nothing, made it look easy. Yeah, if there's some sticking out, and you could get a little bit of the nut on there and then just weld the inside of the nut and the stud, then it just literally just screws out. Not very many of them. I think Troy had to do one of them twice because the weld broke before the thing did. But still, it's not, it's not terrible. At least an LS has all the head bolts standard. Traditional Pontiacs are missing the outer exhaust bolt, manifold bolts in some cases. Would a GTX 3584 RS work well with an internal gate on a 5.3? I've never seen one with an internal gate. Are we getting a Cobra motor video soon, or is it mostly just talking about tests that you've done in the past? Yeah, I don't have another Cobra motor. That was long ago. I probably have more videos that I can do on testing that I did with that motor because I haven't done nearly all of the tests that I've done. You can weld up even below the surface. Yeah, because it won't stick the aluminum. All right, Scott, see you later. We need a 4.6 or an inline 6, preferably a 300, I'm sure. In Australia, you can buy internal gate housings. I don't see how they can get an internal gate to work on a turbo that's capable of 900 horsepower. I don't see how that they're going to get the flow rate that's needed to control that. Anything with a 6? Run a water line from the water pump outlet to I see a 4200, maybe a 292. The next one you'll see will be a 3800, I'm sure, in terms of 6 cylinders. Yeah, it'd be a big internal gate. I remember porting gates out, and even then they were just like a little bit better. What's the tallest, highest intake adapter you've added? Adapter for what? Are you talking about carb spacers or 4.6 Triton V8 from a 99 F-150? I've run lots of 4.6 Triton V8s from 99 F-150s, 2-valve stuff. First thing to look for when a small block Chevy overheats and blows a head gasket, I would look at the thermostat, and then the water pump, and then timing. Jeep 2-valve 5.4, just throw it on the gap rings and boost it to the moon. The other problem with internal gates is they tend to put in exhaust elbow and at a 90 to the exhaust flow. Yeah, because they usually are trying to fit that. And so sometimes because of the packaging, they have to reduce flow. Have you ever tested any Cummins engines? Yeah, I owned a Dodge Ram that we ran a bunch on the engine, on the chassis dyno, but they won't run that on the engine dyno at West Tech. We want to see what it takes to kick a rod out of a 4.6 on the dyno. Yeah, I just like to run a 2-valve, a 4.6 2-valve, not a 5.4, a 4.6. Still have those old school Cobra video info results floating around somewhere, or is that many moons ago? No, I have all of the data and all of the photos and everything. I keep all of that stuff. But a lot of that stuff was early on, way before YouTube was, certainly before I was doing YouTube. So we weren't doing video on a lot of that. Most of it was photos. I'm just thinking to minimize space and welding. It's not advisable. I'll stay away from it. 2 minutes left. That's right. We need 5 more 2 minutes. I wonder what the Triton V10 is capable of. I don't know. I would like to run one of those. What Cummins did you own? Like I said, I owned a 2008 Ram 3500 dually. And we did turn the boost up on it. And we did a few things to it. Did a programmer and stuff. I remember how disappointed I was when we turned the boost up. I'm like, this doesn't feel any faster. Then we added the fuel to it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a lot better. That feels a lot better now. Whatever the 2-valve 5.4 does, but with 2 more cylinders. Yeah. I mean, we know what they're rated at. I think it's going to do, it's going to make the power that a 4-valve motor makes or the 3-valve motor makes, and then, but it'll make way more torque because it's bigger. The Triton V10 is capable of a lot. If you set the revs low, they'll crack the crank like a diesel if you turn them too hard. Do you think that it's the length of the crank that is the problem? One minute. So we had 2 minutes, and now we have 1 minute. An MSD can pull timing when nitrous is triggered. I think the Digital 7 allows the most configured without adding modules. Split pin crank. Yeah. I wonder if any combination could extract RPM power from a 6.8. Well, those guys are doing the build it yourselves or whatever. They did a 4-valve version of that. I don't know if it's run yet or anything. And then the Roush guys did some high output, I thought super powerful combination of the length, the split journals, and the fact that they were specifically built low revving heavy truck cranks. That's like 4.8s and 5.3s and 6.0s are like that too. 8,000 RPM later. I'm going to do my first engine build, 350 TBI roller block, vehicles for use. Yeah, just take a look at all of the small box videos that I have up. Just if you tell us what kind of power output you want, and is it going to be a TBI motor? Because that's not going to be great. But the block and stuff, I don't know how much. Whenever you're talking about wanting to do an engine for whatever, you just got to tell us what kind of power output you want. That's the key to everything. And on that note, at 1:09, it's time to go because it has been 2 minutes. But the good news is I will see you guys all tomorrow.